Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Acting Mayor Dave Dillon,
Here.
Council Members Ken Mueller,
Here.
Norris Johnson,
Here.
Lindsay Larson. Here.
Approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for approval?
So move.
I'll second.
Any changes or additions? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Agenda passes. Consent agenda. On the consent agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes from November 17th, 2022. Approval of bills. Resolution 2253, which is the license renewals. 2254, donations. Resolution 2255, write-off invoices. Ordinance number 506, amending Chapter 31 of the Planning Commission, second reading. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda passes. Open forum. If there's anyone here tonight that would like to address the council on anything that is not on the agenda, you can do so at this time. Okay, moving on. Public hearing, truth and taxation. Do we need anything special to open that, or we just?
Yep. We need to document the time we open the Truth and Taxation public hearing.
6:32, truth and taxation is opened.
And if anyone is here that would like to speak on Truth and Taxation?
I think we went through it in the preliminary, and this made reductions since then. I believe I don't have the levy number in front of me. It was a negative
1.71.
1.71 decrease. So hearing nothing, I will close the public hearing at 6:33. Move on to requests and communications. There were not any tonight. Ordinance and resolutions. Ordinance 507, Chapter 34. Fees, charges, and rates, zoning, first reading. Can I get a motion before we discuss?
Move for approval.
I'll second.
Discussion. Tammy, did you have something to add to this?
No, I think we've got everything covered on this one for the zoning fee increases.
One question I have that several of these you added an escrow account.
We've always had that. It's in our zoning.
Oh, okay. But it wasn't.
It was never on the fee schedule before, but it is in our
okay.
zoning code.
What is that escrow for?
Escrow is for when there's like a planned unit development and our engineers get involved, our city attorney gets involved. Those escrow fees cover those fees.
Okay. So it's just kind of for
Yeah,
unknown or whatever things come up. Okay.
Do we want to waive the second reading on this one?
you certainly can.
Do I need a motion for that?
Yes, you do.
I'll make a motion to waive the second reading.
I'll second.
Or Norris go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page on all this. And all in favor of waiving the second reading?
Aye.
Opposed? So if there's nothing else, all in favor of ordinance 507?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ordinance 507 passes.
All right.
Ordinance 508, Chapter 34, fees, charges, and rates, shelter fees, first reading.
Move for approval.
I'll second.
Now, is this the part that I've had about 20 questions on with the nonprofit sentence? Is this part of this? Or is that different?
That is different,
Okay, so we don't need to worry about that right now.
right.
Okay.
One question I had on this, that right at the bottom of the page, the park grounds rental for all parks, it says a $500 deposit from the special event applicant?
That's always been in our,
Okay.
Fee
But now,
schedule.
I suppose they can do a special event in the other parks, but they've always been in rec park, but, okay.
right.
Any other questions on this? There's no other discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ordinance 508 passes. Ordinance 509, rezone request from Eric and Jill Hardy, first reading. This is the ordinance amending section 156 of the zoning ordinance. Did we want Phil to address this?
Yes, he's here somewhere. Oh, there you are.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the request in front of you is for rezoning at 420 10th Street Northeast. Eric and Jill Hardy own this 8-acre parcel. You have my planning report in your packet from December 5th. This was heard by the Planning Commission on December 5th. As outlined in my packet, this parcel sits between existing single-family neighborhood on 4th Avenue and other streets over there, and industrial land. It's actually a corner that touches 6th Avenue right across from Haggis. So this property is in kind of a unique situation in that it is zoned R2 for 1 and 2 family, low density residential, but it's guided on in our comprehensive plan and land use plan as industrial. And the request is to make it multifamily, R3. As I point out, this pattern of single family to multifamily to industrial is kind of a textbook land use pattern that you'd like to have. Normally, you wouldn't like to see single family butted right up against industrial. So this property, in being kind of long and thin, would provide a long dimension of that residential, multifamily residential between the single family and industrial. The council has considerable discretion in this, in rezoning. This isn't something where you're kind of pushed in one direction or another. You can decide what's appropriate here. This was heard at the Planning Commission. There was good discussion. I think it's fair to say there was concern expressed by a number of neighbors that they would just soon keep it as the R2 zoning for single family, then have it go to the higher R3 zoning. Even though it's guided for industrial, and if somebody came in and requested that it be rezoned to industrial, it would be the appropriate thing to rezone it exactly as you said in your future land use plan, what you want, which is industrial. So this really does present kind of two, maybe even 3 paths here, which is keep it as it is, it's single family. You could choose to not do this. You could choose to approve this request as recommended by the Planning Commission, and it was unanimous with 1 abstention at the Planning Commission meeting, or you could, at some future date, decide you want to zone it to industrial as it's guided in your land use plan. Should you follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission, there are suggested findings in your packet. The applicant, the builder Jerry Worth, on behalf of the owners, did submit a site plan for apartment buildings, and there's comments on that plan in my report. But you're not acting on that plan. If it's rezoned, you could come in with a different plan and address some of those comments or do something different. The only request is simply to rezone from R2 to R3 tonight. So I'd be happy to answer questions if you have any, but as you note, there is an ordinance in your packet, 509, that would make this change on the zoning map should you so choose.
I had one question did mention in here about the front 2 acres. He had mentioned, I believe, about possibly a split zoning, and that would be industrial, which I am not, my personal opinion is I'm not a fan of that. But could this development, just because it's R3, it could be single-family homes, it could be twin homes, it could be,
Yes, yeah.
Right.
It isn't required to be apartment buildings, just that apartments would be allowed.
An option.
And also that front 2 acres, even though he's shown that and mentioned that's his plan, the request in front of you is to rezone the entire
Correct.
8 acres to R3. So if he wanted something different, they would need to come back with a separate request for rezoning for that.
okay, and I just want to clarify that. If you have no other questions right now, I would like to allow a few people to speak at this
I guess it
time.
would be the
If we-
two that
What?
brought in. You have 2 of the forms in front of you?
Yep, okay,
Yeah. Those were the 2 that requested to speak.
okay. Denise Miller. Can you just state your name and address, please?
Denise Miller, 1135 4th Avenue Northeast.
Thank you. Go ahead,
So
yep, it's all
my
yours.
concern is, anything you build back there, it be it industrial, commercial, or a ton of apartment buildings, you're gonna be covering a lot of ground up. I already have water problems on my land because somehow the person that built their house next to me changed the elevation of his land. So I get all of his runoff, all the snow melt, everything. I actually, it's horrible. In the spring, I can't go up in my backyard or my side yard because they're so flooded. So if you cover up more ground that's not gonna be absorbing the water, I'm gonna get flooded. There's no doubt in my mind that I'm gonna get flooded. And it just doesn't seem fair. Well, you know, because it seems like Milaca should have done something about that back when they were building the house, that they're not supposed to. Isn't there an ordinance that says they're not supposed to?
Yeah, are you, where, do you border the industrial park, or you,
I
or border Hardy's property?
Yeah. She doesn't get runoff from the Hardys, though. Denise and I had a good conversation yesterday
Okay.
about where her water was coming from.
Okay,
So it really wasn't from the Hardys' property. It
No.
just comes off of the neighbor's property because they built up on a different level,
okay, so it
a
could be
different
more of a.
grade, I guess I
Yeah, so
say.
it all runs to my yard.
Okay,
And in the spring, I mean, I don't even know what I can do about the water issues. I've tried everything that I can think of. My septic, or my sump pump is running all the time. And
is there a possible drainage ditch or drainage, I know we did one
Well,
in the
we
Catholic
looked-
church back
Yeah, we
there.
looked back there, but there isn't a drainage ditch back there.
Okay, because we ran, well, we should talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
because I know at the Catholic church, there was we did a drain that
That could,
collected and then ran underground and connected to the sewer line. Because that's where I used to live, and that
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
worked.
okay.
I'd like to show you some pictures
Mhm.
so that you get a better idea of what I'm dealing with.
Great, thank you.
She has some major
Oh, yeah.
flooding going on.
Yeah.
You know, it
No.
doesn't go into the ground, it just
Right.
sits
And it comes from like this property?
from the property to the south.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's something we can look at drainage wise that way, hook into the storm sewer or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, there's,
Check with
because
Gary.
I think, I mean, part of the building code and zoning is you can't have runoff from
Right.
one lot onto another.
Right.
I mean,
But
it's-
wouldn't some of that be covered when they, it,
1075 4th Avenue Northeast. So on the map where the, well, we're really close to where the farmhouse is, let's just say, like 1 or 2 houses down. There are many Milaca citizens, homeowners in that neighborhood that oppose this, and not all of them could be here tonight, not all of them were choosing to speak, but I can see people from at least 6 different households, aside from ours and the Hardys here tonight. And they just kind of wanted to let you know that were standing against it. The planning commission was under the obligation to consider the adverse effects of this rezoning, and we weren't feeling very heard at that meeting. A lot of the questions were sidestepped, possibly avoided, or people didn't know the answers. And no matter what different objections we brought up or concerns we raised, it felt as though the decision was made before we were even there to an extent. And so that was kind of concerning, so I wanted to make sure and come and talk to you about it. They have the obligation to consider the adverse effects under these 5 different categories according to the comprehensive plan. The first one was the need for affordable housing that needed to be demonstrated. I asked about the current vacancies, the current vacant residences in Milaca as of 2020. The information that I found showed that there were already 96 vacant residences. And when I asked about that, instead of sharing the answer with me, I was asked where I got the advanced copy of the comprehensive plan that isn't approved yet. And I asked for like statistics or studies, and all we got told is that there are calls being made to City Hall to ask about affordable living arrangements. There are listings online right now for affordable living, and we have quite a bit of affordable rental property, even if it is toward the fuller end of capacity. And so I'm just not sure that that was demonstrated. And all that Mr. Carlson's report stated was there is a need. And it didn't say what the need was, where that information came from, or how we know that as a fact. So that was a little frustrating. The second thing was the character of the surrounding area was supposed to be considered, but the number one value for Milaca, according to their own comprehensive plan, was to maintain that small town rural feel, the charm that attracts people to Milaca. And this is going to be a 10-building eyesore right on the highway where everybody sees it coming down from up north. It just seemed a little out of place, but not only that, right next to the single family housing where we have the small children and the volunteers and the retirees, it doesn't feel very in place to put a 3-story, well, 4 3-story apartment buildings, or more or less, depending on whether or not the plan for this site is enacted, right next to Mayberry. Just feels really out of character. And again, all I just said was, well, you know, different towns do this sort of thing. But when we take a look at the Milaca city right here, this is the plot of land that we're talking about. And all of this here is already future land use for residential. And since there aren't 100 houses already lined up, I just felt that one of those might be more appropriate. You can put the apartments in there and then build the houses around them instead of blindsiding dozens of homeowners with all of a sudden having apartments 35 feet from our backyard. Under whether the area will be depreciated or tend to depreciate, all it says is, we don't think so. I mean, that's not the exact words, but it was pretty close in that report. And again, it just, there's no answer, there's no statistics. All we can feel is our home values going down and our property taxes going up, and we're not getting any answers. The fourth thing that needed to be considered was the geography suitable. Denise just mentioned the draining. The whole thing is built on clay, and everybody has their sump pump running constantly. And the whole backyard, the part that abuts the Hardy property, I think there's supposed to be some sort of a drainage ditch, but nobody knows if the city is supposed to be maintaining it or not. I know the DeHarts were out there like trying to empty their own drainage ditch so that things would drain and things would go. And I'm just not sure. But the traffic on 6th is gonna be crazy. I don't know if the new roundabout that they're considering is going to be able to handle it. And also, people looked at this area of land and decided what that land would be suitable for in the future. And they thought that industry would be more suitable. If this high density, multiple residential is going to be that suitable, why wasn't it zoned that way in the future land use? When people were building the plan and looking at these things, I'm just wondering why they thought maybe industrial would work better, especially if they're thinking about turning that front parcel into industrial anyway. Because that's what we were told at the planning commission, is that it's for our benefit to have the apartments there instead of industrial, because, oh, well, we might put in chicken processing and you'll have the crowing and the smell. I asked several of our neighbors, they'd all rather have industrial. That's what it was planned for when they bought their houses. And I felt that the city should realize that the city decided that that maybe wouldn't be the best place to put that. But for the fifth thing they needed to consider was whether or not it was in line with the comprehensive plan for the city. And for Mr. Carlson's stellar report, and I don't mean to demean it at all. Again, all it really said was, well, we just have to change the plan. This plan that people sat down and put all this time and effort and thought and research into, we're just gonna need to change that to make it work with our new plan. And again, I'm not saying it's supposed to be set in stone, but your own plan says that if the plan is enacted the way it's intended to, the city will continue to expand and be a desirable place for everyone to enjoy and live. And I think there are consequences to ignoring that in this case. And then lastly, the comprehensive plan also, everywhere you look, not only does it mention this rural feel and the charm and the thing that makes us special, but lastly, it also really emphasizes industry. And industry, everybody's commuting. We don't have enough local jobs for 96 more apartments worth of people. And the industry was the way that the city had planned to continue to grow economically as well as in population. So I just wanted to thank you for your time, and thank you to all of my neighbors for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just want to mention in our land use goal, in our current comprehensive plan, objective number 1 is sustainable growth. Grow by investing in establishing areas carefully, planning new neighborhoods.
Maybe a couple of things. I
Yep.
maybe try to answer at least a couple of your questions the best I can. But one of the things, that land to the east is not in city limits, so that kind of rules that out, because any development needs city water and sewer, and so that creates some problems there.
Might have been pointing to the wrong spot. I think it's that little orange and red right along 169 there. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, right next to
Okay.
169. Yep,
Yeah.
yep, by the, just east of or west of the childcare of All-Star.
The other thing too is that a thought that occurred to me is that the market is generally the best indicator of where the demand is. And this land has been available for sale for private home development or for industrial, and nobody stepped forward to do that. I mean, the industrial use could have purchased that, but there isn't the demand there at this point in time. And the same way, a developer looking at putting in, 1 or 2 family homes could have stepped forward and gone with it, but they're not. The market or the demand isn't there, at least determined by the developers. So, it kind of, the market kind of goes where it's led by the demand. Generally, I mean, it's the best indicator we have. So, I don't know. I mean, I can certainly understand your reservations about it. There's no question about that, because I would, if I lived there, I would have the same feelings as you.
Although
So
you just voted to pass an apartment right by your property.
Yeah, I've got one that
Right.
8-unit apartment is right. It's going to be 20 feet from my property line. And really, when it comes down to it, if I wanted to control what happens there, I would have need to own it, and that's kind of where the bottom line. But Anyway, I don't know if that helps at all, but,
Right, no, I
It's-
understand. I can't say much to the market, because I don't know what it was listed at, or, you know, what the developer or family member is offering.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it was competitive in price, so, I mean, that's something that I had not seen or been able to research, so thank you for that.
yeah. I mean, this type of use is gonna bring the most income per acre, you know, when you get the higher density and, you know, certainly more than, one or two family homes, but, I don't see there was really any way in the future that this wouldn't be rezoned, because, you know, if somebody wanted to come in and put in like those fourplexes, like out by the Dairy Queen, you know, that, they would need to be rezoned for that as well, you know, so, but anyway. There's-
Can I say something?
Sure.
Why do we
Can you
have-
get a name and address, please?
Don Hero, 1310 Third Avenue Northeast.
Thank you.
Why do we have 90-some units going in when you have 8 by yours? That's easier to handle. You're talking 300-400 people gonna be
Yeah.
living there.
Yeah.
And that's a lot.
I think
That's
I
only.
have other
a-
things, but I think it's a phased thing. Isn't it, they're not talking about throwing up 4.
Understand
Yeah,
having-
it's phased.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I moved from Apple Valley to here, and they started piling in apartment buildings. Next thing you know, we had more crime, transient people, and it just turned into a mess. And the school got kids that were from other areas that shouldn't have been there, but they were going to school there and causing problems.
Did
Too
you want to
many
do that?
people for that section of
Those
property.
those 10?
And I don't, as I said, I'm pretty sure his plan is not to put in 4 unless there's a need, correct?
The need can be smaller.
Right, I agree, and I have some other comments, but my hope would be that it would be some apartments, but also maybe some twin home, that's why I asked that question, some twin homes, maybe he plots residential in a portion. This by no means is that the final plan that we have, you know, in that early preliminary
I
thing.
agree, there is a need, I understand.
Yeah, yeah, before I say anything, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Mary Anderson, and I live on 1125 Fourth Avenue Northeast, and I would be right directly behind these apartment buildings to the west. And I agree with Denise about the water problem with that pond, because that would be right behind my house. And she didn't mention much about mosquitoes, but that would be one big problem. And I'm the house to the south of her that is, she's referring to the landscaping, that the water drains. But I didn't build the house and put in the land, or the extra fill. It was done before I bought my property, but now I'm the owner, and so that's the way it is, but it's not my fault. The other thing I wanna address is that letter you sent out with stating it was gonna change from R2 to R3. I just thought it was going from a single family to three houses on a property. Very deceiving. It didn't say it was gonna be 4 apartment buildings with almost 100 units. So I was out of town at the time of that hearing for the planning commission, so I did not attend. But that was very deceiving with that notice you sent out. It did not say anything about this many apartments going in.
Yeah, somebody took me off too, about the
Yeah.
same thing.
I mean, you didn't tell us that was not mentioned about that kind of thing going in.
I don't, Phil, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but when you're just approving a zoning thing, there is no plan. The plan is only there for, you know what I mean?
The requester is just to change the designation on the zoning map. And then the actual plan that goes in will be reviewed in the future. And if it meets the standards in the zoning code and the building code, it can get built.
Right, but it doesn't mean that that's the plan that's being voted on tonight, correct? All right,
Then another thing I was noticing, according to the plan I was given, all these apartments are sitting right behind us in that Fourth Avenue Northeast section of Hidden Pines. What about the south end that goes down by 10th Street? Why not build them down there? You're right access to the street then, if you wanna build apartments. And then you have drainage out to 10th Street, where I know there's storm drains right on 10th Avenue, 10th Street, that run right along that highway. Would you need a pond that could drain right into the storm drains? That's just another thought.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think for a development, I think a catch basin is required. Once you get to a certain size, you have to have that
Storm
catch
sewer.
basin.
You have to do eco studies of.
Yeah, and they do studies and,
Just, if you don't mind if I speak for 1 second.
Sure.
Just so everybody knows, what I did propose is just that. It's a proposal of.
Excuse me, just to be clear, so you're,
I'm Jared Worth.
okay, thank you.
I'm from Siegel, Minnesota. And it's a proposal of basically the highest density possible on the land that's there, correct? And so doing that, I hope people respect the fact I wasn't trying to pull any wool over anybody's eyes. This is just a proposal of what our thoughts were, but it could go down to, like was said, could be twin homes, could be fourplex. You just don't know until we have to get through the zoning process, get approved before we can start doing work with the architects, the civil engineers and different things like that on what the land is conducive of. And so I understand where everybody's coming from. I hope that there is a respect there that we were trying to be forthright in what we were proposing. And it's not saying this is what you see on paper is set in stone, because that's not the case. The buildings could move to 10th Street. They could move here, like the whole design could change. And obviously, as Phil stated, we have to go through our due diligence, go through the council and do the proper measures so that everybody's on the same page and that you guys are comfortable with what we're proposing as well. But right now, we're just here to talk about a rezone.
Thank you for clarifying. Just a couple of things to try and answer the questions you had a while back. First of all, there is no good answer to this. If we go industrial, people are going to be mad because now they got a factory right in their backyard. If we stay single housing, now we've lost an opportunity to bring housing that's much needed to our town. If we go apartments, people are going to be mad because there's apartment. There's no going to be good answer for everybody. It just isn't. And so what we need to try and do is look at what is the best answer for the city of Milaca. And I hope some of these things will answer some of those questions. As far as a needs, a housing need, yes, there was some just, what would you call it? Just discussion information. I taught at the school. We never have housing for new teachers that come to town. There's not market rate. We're talking market rate stuff. We're not talking low income. We're talking market like Tapestry Square, like the ones.
Because this is just a rezoning.
Correct, but I'm trying to calm some questions on that though. I know the builder well enough and the work he's done that I'm not, but you're right. That's another discussion to have. But we do have a housing needs survey. It was conducted by Lakes and Pines, correct?
Yes, by East Central Regional Housing Collaborative. Maxfield Research did it. It's 442 pages. And there are pages in here of the housing needs analysis.
Yeah, so it did address the housing need analysis, and it does show projected out multiple years. And I know those projections often aren't right or whatever, but it's data that we have to use data. So it does show a need that would support some additional housing. Besides the anecdotal information you get from businesses that can't find housing for their employees, which is the whole nother part about the industry part. Right now, the industry problem is workers. I know a couple people that have businesses in town in the industrial park would love to expand, can't. We do not have people that'll go work there. Hopefully this would bring more workers into town that would be willing to work, not willing to work, that have the ability to work. So hopefully that could kind of address that. The other part is home value. I don't know how that Phil would know that better than me. I don't know how that works as far as an apartment being in the same block as your house. I don't know that answer. But I can tell you, it would not create your taxes going up. The tax revenue to the city would be substantial.
There.
Thousands.
I would suspect each one of these buildings is probably going to pay $30-some thousand a year in property taxes. I'm sure you've looked into that.
You're well aware.
and there's really no additional cost to the city. I mean, the street is there, the street's already maintained, so it would cost the city almost $0.
Water and sewer.
Water and sewer is available, we've got the capacity, so it would,
So can I just point out that I am rather confused right now because a lot of the responses that you guys are giving us are saying that we shouldn't be focused on there being big apartment buildings there. But then other responses are that they're gonna be big apartment buildings that are gonna bring in a lot of tax.
Well, I'm not saying that there's not gonna be big apartments. There might be. There very well might be. I'm just saying that I got a pretty good, I think we've talked about the fact that they'd be market rate apartments. You've talked about maybe elderly on the first floor. You've talked about, 2-bedroom market rate apartments. That's all I'm saying. I didn't say the size. I just said that is not the finished plan. That's just a sketch to look at zoning. That's all that was.
Okay.
The other part, and along with taxes, was the water and sewer, which would benefit the city. That would create some income for the city also, which again helps with taxes. As far as comp plan, those are pretty flexible. I agree with you. You try to use that as a guide, but you have to be flexible because needs change as years go on. And with some things we've discussed in the last 6 months, the idea of a residential, whether it's residential, whether it's townhomes, whether it's apartment, buffer between homes and the industrial park is a good model, and it's a proven model that is recommended. Those are just some things. Oh, the other thing was just the whole, I think we get, and I think there's a reason in this town for it, for some, I'm not gonna say more than that, that sometimes we look at renting as a certain, like it's a bad thing. We need rentals for, now we've got houses that are extremely expensive. House rates just keep going up. Interest rate went up again. It's kind of not affordable to buy a home right now. If you have 2 kids, you came in town to teach, you need an apartment to live until you can get some money and buy a home or build a home or whatever. It's a needed, it can be a very good thing. And we have some beautiful Tapestry Squares, nice apartments. The ones Lou Jean has by the bowling alley, very nice apartments, have residents. They're not full of police calls. We ran the police reports on them. The vast majority were medical or locked out of the apartment or things like that. As far as single homes, how many letters did we send out to single home owners in this town last summer for nuisance? 40?
Well over 40.
Yeah. So it's not, I don't think you need to be in an apartment to have those issues. I think it can be homes that can have the same issues. And I'm not arguing one way, well, I am, because I do think we have a need for housing. But I'm not saying that that's the way we have to go. I'm just trying to answer those questions that you had. Those are the notes I wrote down that hopefully answer why, like some of Phil's opinions, where they come from. And his is based on absolute fact, and ours can be based a little more on just our knowledge of being in Milaca. As I said, I don't have a great answer. I think it's a difficult situation, but those are just some thoughts. I don't know you guys.
I think too, the trend in the future will be more rental demand. I think as real estate prices go up, there's fewer and fewer people, especially the younger families that will be able to afford buying their own home. And so that I think we're seeing that more and more, that the demand really is growing in the rental market. And that's just kind of the nature of things now.
I know that was what we were told from the realtors in town also. Any other thoughts?
Can I speak to a couple of things? I did email Tammy the other day and asked to be put on to speak.
Yep, I thought you said public forum,
Yep.
but you can go now. Yep, go ahead.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, just say your name and
I
address.
let Dave know.
Yeah,
Yep, just
not
name-
specifically identified in my email, but I wanted to.
Yep, name and address and you're all set.
Absolutely.
I'm Brenda Formuth. I live at 400 10th Street Northeast. Some of the things that I had concerns about have already been discussed. But a couple of additional things that I wanted to talk about is that I do have additional concerns that the responses that we're getting tonight are different than what we were told at the Planning Commission meeting last week. And that makes me feel like I don't know who to trust. I'm looking to all 5 of you to provide us with accurate information, and when it's different information that was presented last week as what is being presented tonight, makes me question, who am I supposed to believe? Or what am I supposed to believe? A couple of the things, I will say I was very disappointed in the planning commission meeting and the responses that we got, because, like Angela said, we didn't, like, it was kind of like our concerns weren't addressed, and didn't really get concrete evidence or support for anything. The first question that I had asked last week at the commission meeting was, what data is there to support it? I understand you've already addressed that tonight, but I am kind of confused and don't understand why that data wasn't available to all of the residents that were at the planning commission meeting last week. Like, did it all of a sudden just surface in the last week? I feel like that must have existed before, so why are we getting different answers tonight?
It might be that a lot of those situations, when a planning commission meeting comes up, we don't know what the public is going to ask, so we don't know what to bring. That way, the research can be done and the questions can be answered later.
Okay, I feel like that would be a pretty basic question that you would have the answers to in your back pocket already when you're talking about
Kind of
a proposal
hard
like this.
too.
The other thing that I question is, we already have a property that's similarly sized to this, that is within city limits, zoned R3, right down the road. It's got all the city hookups that are needed. So really what we're asking to do is to have 2 properties in town that can allow for up to 116 rental units on them. I have a hard time believing that there's a need for that many additional rental units in our town. So I don't understand why we would need to change the zoning on one property when we already have a property that's right down the road that's already zoned that way. My second question that I had at the meeting was, what plans does the city have for creating more 1 or 2 family residential lots? Because I felt like those are becoming to be in short supply right now. It sounded to me like that was confirmed, that we don't have very many 1 and 2 family lots available anymore. But there's not really a plan in place for how to resolve that issue. Right now, we have a property that's already zoned for that. We have a property that's already zoned for R3. So to me, it seems like the most obvious plan would be develop them both how they're already zoned. We have a need for both things, so let's just develop them how they're already zoned. The last question that I had last week was if a high-density population area of this size would come with increased crime, and if so, how does the city plan on managing that? And the response at the planning commission meeting was, yep, it will come with increased crime. It was stated that all the apartment buildings in Milaca have an increased crime rate, so the proposed apartments likely will too. But the response for how would the city plan to manage that was that the city will just have to deal with it. I didn't feel like that was an acceptable response. I have chosen to raise my family in a small town where it's safe, and for people to not, by people I mean city leaders, to not have a plan in place for how we're going to manage that when you're talking about changing a property like this I just don't find it to be acceptable. I know I have pretty high expectations, but my expectations were that when I asked that question, there would be a plan. Like, we're gonna do this to prevent the higher crime that'll come with it. We're going to, add another police officer to the force, or we're gonna increase the hours of existing officers, something, but to just have a flat out, well, we'll just deal with it. Like,
Can I speak to that?
that just
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, please do, Quinn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You had mentioned, and this was actually done after me hearing the concerns at one of the concerns being crime at from the planning commission meeting. So they didn't have that information, and I guess I'm not sure why someone said that it's an absolute that permits are gonna increase crime in the area. But I looked at what I felt was one of the most comparable properties in town, that would be the Tapestry Square Apartments. Comparable in the sense that new apartments, I imagine, would be well managed. Again, new apartments, Tapestry Square is fairly new. And between both buildings, 395 and 405, since 2007, we've had an average of 12 and a half calls per year to both buildings. And as stated, a lot of those were medicals, some suspicious activities, which quite often for us is somebody saw someone else that they thought maybe was up to no good, and it turns out that there was a very justifiable reason for that person doing whatever. So for our community, sure, some communities it might increase the crime, but for our community, just looking at similar buildings, it's not necessarily the case.
How many units are there?
I would imagine, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would imagine probably close to the 20 mark.
Yeah, it's
There's 18 units.
18 units in each
And-
building.
In each building.
We have houses that unfortunately, I think, be a single residence can go to both things. So for 40 families to have a need for the police department 12 and a half times a year, that's not very safe.
And I
Thank you, Quinn.
appreciate that response, thank you very much. To me, I just felt, like I said, maybe my expectations were too high, but I felt like for city leaders to be even considering a proposal like this to the point of bringing it before the planning commission, sending the letter out to the neighboring residents about it, that there would have been enough forethought to be prepared and think about all of those things ahead of time. It feels to me like it was more of a, hey, we've got a developer that wants to come in here and develop this property. Let's go for it. Let's do it. It didn't seem like there was a lot of forethought put into it. Overall, this kind of also follows up with a few things that some other people have said, but my question really is, are we really focusing on what residents want our town to be in the future? Or are we just looking at a money-making thing? And I get that there are some aspects to both of it. We do need, as a city, the city needs to make money in order to continue to thrive as a good place for people to live. But I don't feel like this is the only way to do that, especially like I said, when we already have this, a property that is zoned and planned specifically for this. It's already there. So why don't we develop that one first? And if we need more after that, then we go to look at rezoning other properties. Otherwise, what are we gonna end up doing with that one? Just have to rezone it to something else? So like just rezone and rezone and rezone and rezone on the fly all the time?
I have a suspicion that you possibly looked at other locations and other possibilities. Generally, that's, so I don't know what the.
I know that location's been for sale for years, and it's not a,
And there are
not a
some.
builder, but I have heard concerns with the usability of it compared to this property. I guess is how I'll say
To
it.
be 100% 100% honest, I haven't looked into that property. This one, just so everybody here knows, Jill and Eric did propose to Heggies back in April, to purchase this property. When they declined, that's when me and my real estate partner came out, evaluated the property, and started talking about options and possibilities. And to the point of, I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but the biggest concern with developers right now is the cost of, they call it turning dirt. So basically to take a piece like Jill and Eric's piece, if they were like, if these guys said, no, we can't, we're gonna keep it single family, mathematically it would not be feasible to develop it because the cost to develop it, do all the, curb, gutter, sewer and waters, utilities, things like that, your house price point, so if, I'm not sure what people's house property values are, let's say on 4th Street, but now we're looking at a starting price point of, $350,000 to $400,000 per house and increasing quickly, and again, now you take on with the rising interest rates and other things and the cost of building materials, it makes it unfeasible. So that is I understand your point and concern 100%. But that is to answer your question, why the council should consider this and why otherwise that land will sit vacant until Milaca can raise its annual salaries to accommodate $500,000 houses. Because the price to do construction right now is expensive. And that's just the honest truth of it.
So is the honest truth that you're gonna put in apartment buildings?
No, I don't know. I'm telling you, I don't know. Right now, we're here for a rezoning, and after that, I
That's
can
it.
start
Was
exploring.
it can't, the cost would be so high.
I think we need to move on.
It's not the same.
A single.
It's just gonna keep going. And
Right, a portion,
Not.
right, I'll let you explain it.
Excuse me, Mayor, I
Yes.
think it would be helpful if you told us how the process goes after this.
Sure,
If
that's a good point.
rezoned, then how many times do we come back here to make sure we have some privacy and some of our concerns are being met?
Yep, that's a really good point. You want to address that, Phil?
So if this rezoning is approved, then the property would be R3. And there's standards in the code for R3, for height, density, size of units, number of units, setbacks, screening, landscaping, etc. So if plans are presented, they would come to City Hall, they would be reviewed by the city staff, city engineer, building official, etc. If it meets all the city's standards, then there would be no other official decision of the planning commission or city council. It could simply go through and get a building permit process and be built. If there's something that needs, say, a variance, that the setback or the density or something doesn't meet standards, then they would need to come back in front of the planning commission and city council, and you would be notified. But assuming they would meet all the city standards, which is always the easy way to go, I'd recommend that you do that, then it would simply go through the building permit review process.
That did not solve any of my concerns.
So would,
Well, technically, if they're gonna develop the whole
Would-
8 acres, they could technically put
Maybe-
in like 100.
Well, and-
but
Forty-six.
is
No,
this,
because then it would be beyond, you got to stay within the standards
is
established.
this proposal within those
Yeah.
criteria?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there,
Now, that's not to say there aren't other approvals that would be needed. That specific plan needs to have access to different properties, so there'd have to be something figured out for streets and subdividing it with a new plat. But the actual building and what it would look like, et cetera, something like that could probably be built under the city's standards in R3.
I have one more question. Was this property listed for sale as is?
down for how much?
Well, I feel like there were a lot of comments that alluded to the fact that it can't be sold as is, or nobody will purchase it as is. But has it?
No, I think his comment was from and then correct me if I'm wrong, but from a builder's perspective, just the math doesn't work, is what you're
He
saying.
said it will just sit vacant. But
With just the single structure that's on it right now, the single dwelling. That's what
But could it be sold as is? Like, would somebody buy it as is? Do we know that? Has it been listed?
Well, you
for
could,
sale?
but that's the buyer's choice, that's not our choice. That's up to the owners. That's not our choice.
But then there's,
Right, but that's an option, like there's nothing that's making us say like, this property has to be sold to an industrial business or to a developer that's going to develop it into something else.
No, but the owners have a buyer and people don't get to dictate who buys your property.
No, I realize that. There was comments that were made that made me think like, was it for sale as is and it didn't get purchased? I was trying to clarify that.
Well, you've been obviously thinking of selling it for some time. I mean, you approached Haggie's last spring, so I don't know, if you've advertised it or what, but listed but
I'm assuming industrial is what your first sale was, the people that are in the industrial park to buy. And that's why it wasn't posted, because you're trying to sell it to them as a
Yeah.
first option. The other thing I just had is just as far as land, because I want to make sure your questions are answered. There isn't like new lots, we just approved a new lot not long ago and the house is already on it for, right on 23 there. There's another house by me that's just going on a vacant lot. So vacant lots go pretty quick. There are a couple for sale. I think the future building ones are a couple different ways. It would almost involve annexing, except behind me is 123 acres. Right now, you have property also, but at some point that could become residential. Again, you can't speak for other people's property, but that in a comp plan thing, that is potential housing right there that the city has looked at. But again, it's owned by someone and it's not an option at this point, but there isn't a whole lot of other land unless we go out and get land. And that's been the problem with industrial. Except now that we found some north of town there.
Well, and developers look at the market very, very closely because they've got everything on the line. But there's property in and around town that if the market was there, a developer would be in there, trying to purchase that property. But they're just not out there looking for property right now. And haven't, the Milaca has been growing, but very, very slowly, very predictably. We haven't had any of those big market surges like you see closer to the cities. But yeah, there's a couple hundred acres available within the city limits right now that is not developed. And at any point in time, if the market change, that could become available.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
The other thing was the information part. And this is just my interpretation, I could be wrong, but I know we have access to information that sometimes planning commission are just people that volunteer, thankfully, to come and be part of. So sometimes they don't have all the information that we have. So they might not be able to answer some of the questions. And I agree that information should get to them ahead of time. I agree with you.
I'm not trying to attack Tammy.
Yep.
But I will say that all of the answers came from Tammy. So my expectation was that as the city manager, she's immersed in this stuff day in and day out. So that's where I was saying that I was expecting for there to be more defined answers to
Okay.
it because of the fact that it was coming from a person that I thought would be very well versed on a project of this size and magnitude.
well, and because
Okay.
how can we have say if I asked to see the public housing study And all I was told was, well, it's 400 pages. But I couldn't find it online. I tried looking it up on the city's website, everywhere, and I'm pretty resourceful. I've already printed up 400 pages for this. But I couldn't find that, and it just would have been something I would have liked to have researched before that meeting, but if not before that one, at least before this one, so that I can have some of these answers. Because now we're coming in and your responses and her concerns and everything are bringing up 100 more questions with me that unfortunately, it looks like you guys are gonna have to vote tonight. I won't have a chance to look at or consider or bring up.
Yeah, that study is not on our website. That was done by a different organization, but,
Brenda, I did read your email and I just wanted you to know, I did call Tammy and ask if I wanted to make sure, I believe one of the questions was, or statements, that we have a lot of inquiries on rentals,
Yes.
people needing rentals.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get clarification on, okay, so people want to turn their homes into duplexes or rental properties. I wanted to make sure that we had accurate information on the need and how many do we have? I guess we have 100 homes that are, right? 100 homes that are
100, no. Yep.
rental properties.
Yep.
But I wanted to make sure that the need is there. I mean, I completely understand, used to live in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I would have the exact same concerns that everybody else has. That's not why you choose to live where you live. And then for an apartment building to come up, or potential apartment building, you do have concerns, you raise concerns. I mean, I completely understand it, and it's a hard decision to make because, if I was in the same situation and an apartment building was coming behind me or in our neighborhood, our old neighborhood, I would have the exact same concerns that everybody else has. So it's not an easy decision, and I did have the same questions that you were asking, and I confirmed with Tammy, needed to make sure we had the need for it.
and one thing that I just want to add that makes it a little bit different, not different, I guess different or appealing, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the word is. We have a known established developer. I think that's a big part of it. He's done work in our community. He does good work. And I think that makes a difference. It's not just someone from South St. Paul coming in. I shouldn't pick on South St. Paul, but just somewhere coming in to throw up something and leave town, and it's poorly made, and it's, that's not the case here. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's kind of goes on the positive side of this possible project.
But he's not gonna be living right next door to it.
Correct.
But he's not tied to developing that. I mean, if it gets rezoned R3, they can sell it to whoever they want, correct?
Well, he doesn't own it. It's
Just a rezoning.
Yeah, he isn't the
So
one
I
necessarily
understand.
developing it once it's rezoned.
correct. I mean, that's what happens with
I
anything.
just want to clarify.
Yeah.
And the market value thing kind of goes out the window too, if it's rezoned. Like, that's the plan, but not necessarily.
No.
Was I misunderstanding? Sorry.
Phil, did you want to add?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Mayor, a couple of comments that may be helpful here. This question of the need for more housing and more multifamily housing specifically has come up. And perhaps it was my fault in not fleshing out that issue in my report. Frankly, it's not something that I would routinely do. In this kind of rezoning, we're looking kind of at the textbook issues of relationship between land uses and not necessarily fill out the details. At the Planning Commission meeting, Tammy was good enough to mention that there indeed was a housing study that supported the need for that kind of housing in Milaca. And I will say that this study, done by the Maxfield Research Group, if you don't know, they are a very respected organization. I've known them and their work for 30 years, and they do work all over the region. They're very well respected. So it's a very well-done study that would document the need. And I can also say I do this work as planner assisting cities in 8 different communities currently in Minnesota, in Maple Lake and in Centerville and in Stacy and in Orinoco and Benson and many other places. And the need for housing is just a given in all of these communities. That for a good share of the population, they cannot afford single-family homes. So good apartments, well-developed, well-maintained, well-managed, are a need in almost every community of every size in the state. So I can say that from my experience that it's needed and that it will probably be a welcome addition to the housing stock in the community.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I think we've flushed it out pretty well. I think there's, as I said, I don't think there's a answer for everyone, but I think we need to at least address the zoning. So at this time, I'd call for a motion for Ordinance 509, rezone request from Eric and Jill Hardy, first reading.
So move.
I'll second. Any additional discussion? We hashed it over pretty well. Ken, you good?
Yes.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion, Ordinance 509 passes. Resolution 2256, authorizing an alternate interest rate index for Conduit revenue obligation, Country Meadows of Milaca.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Tammy, this is just,
Yep, they have an interest
Similar.
rate change.
okay.
We've done this numerous times in the
Right.
past.
Yes.
Yep, and this isn't the full Conduit debt, it's just an interest change on
Okay.
their loan.
Okay,
So it's an existing one.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
okay.
And who was the second on that?
Who was the
I
second
was.
on that?
Is it Norris?
I second.
Norris did, thank you.
Okay. Any questions on 2256? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution 2256 passes. Resolution 2247, finalized budget and levy.
57?
Did I
2257.
skip one?
No, you said 47.
You said 47.
Oh, I'm sorry. See the glasses thing again. Resolution 2257, finalized budget and levy.
Move for approval?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Just glad to see a negative number. Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Resolution 2257 passes. Reports, departments, commissions, city manager.
I don't have anything to report at this time.
Quinn, did you have anything from the police to add?
I was asked by, I don't know if any of you know who Dan Starr is, he's one of the conservation officers in our area. So I believe it was last Friday, there were some complaints that came in, ended up, you investigated it on the city dump, and there was a major burn. But I think some of the properties to the west of that, were concerned about the smell of the burn. Obviously, it's generally leaves and limbs, portable material for our ordinance. But long story short, Officer Starr asked to go out there, take a look at it, and noticed there was quite a few trash bags included in there. I know that there's been an effort to, when community members are bringing their leaves to gyms, they're not supposed to include trash bags. But just something that Dan Starr wanted you guys to know, I don't know what can be done. If there could be more of an effort when it's dumped out there and clear trash bags out.
There hasn't been really any bags dumped out there since we did the city cleanups. We didn't do that last spring, so those leaves haven't been burnt in 2 years, so that hasn't been, like, everybody, I mean, we probably get 20 bags a year if people were in our shop. But like, it used to be, we'd pick up the whole town, I mean, everybody knew, leave day in, we'd pick up all the brush and the leaves that everybody have out and they'd be in bags, so. Like I said, we haven't done that since not 2022 May, 2021 May was the last time, so Gary didn't burn the dump last year, so that's what they're doing.
Okay. Anything else?
No, just, if you guys have a report this month, look, maybe it's working on it.
Thank you, Quinn. Parks. Now it's that form?
Yes.
Did you want to talk about it all, or did Mary?
Mary,
The
you have
only,
some questions for me.
my question just for you guys, because they've heard me say it about 5 times, is just that first line under general rules. I just wanted to clarify that you wouldn't, a nonprofit doesn't lose their reservation by a paid one if they, Mary, help me say this right. You wouldn't like if, my example was if Trinity had a church service Sunday morning and reserved the park and it's a nonprofit, so it's not paid, I can't come in and rent it that same morning for $50 and kick them out, correct?
Correct, but that's
Okay.
on a case-by-case basis. We wouldn't expect Trinity to use the Graphic Center every weekend for free,
Yes.
you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's more based towards reoccurring nonprofits.
Right.
Right. Okay. That was just my concern reading it. It reads like that, that's all.
Okay, yeah.
So the
Do you need a
paid-
motion on this?
Paid
Yes.
reservation would have to be prior to, I mean.
Yeah, or the nonprofit can pay $10.
Yeah.
And then it's reserved, so.
Sure.
Yeah, we need a motion.
Can I get a motion for that?
So move.
Oh, second.
Any other discussion on it?
One thing was, but if a prepaid reserves it first,
They have it.
they have it. Okay,
Correct.
yeah.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. That was it for parks?
That was it?
Okay. Public Works, Gary's not here, is he?
No.
Probably plowing. Liquor store, let's see, Vicky.
No.
Jesse, Fire Department?
Not much, I didn't make the last meeting, but we ended our fiscal year at 162 calls, and you guys should have had that in the report last month.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, no, not too much. They're in the process of hiring 2 people. They passed some of the hiring requirements, so we're gonna keep working that way, and hopefully by the first of the year, they'll be on.
Great. Thank you. Planning and zoning? Nothing. And airport's gotta be nothing this time of
Nothing
year.
Right now.
Personnel budget and EDC personnel, we'll do that during a closed meeting. Budget is passed, we don't have anything to add to
Yeah,
that, do we?
No.
And EDC, we meet,
We have no meeting.
no meeting in December.
December.
Correct. Our last EDC, well, the other thing we've talked about with EDC besides housing has been childcare and childcare study and and looking at that issue in the city too. Unfinished business agreement between Minnesota Inspections and the city of Milaca, the renewal of our contract.
Move for approval.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that?
Was that 65%?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, our last motion didn't work. Nothing different in that or anything new on there, correct?
No.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agreement passes. The revised developers agreement with Milaca Mini Storage, Matt Haugen.
Yeah, we were able to hash it out with the city's attorney, and I think we all came to an agreement on that.
Great, glad we got that worked out. We need a motion for that?
So move.
Motion.
Got Norris?
Ken, you want to second it? Norris?
Okay, I'll second, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? This was all worked out with Damien and you're good with it?
We're
and-
good. Got it closed,
Yep, perfect. All right, hearing nothing, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Developer agreement passes, you should be all set. And MOU with RecFest, do we have the new one printed?
I printed it and I emailed it to you.
Can we do it with just, or do we need to, okay.
You can.
All right. We were able to work out the RecFest memo of understanding for them to be a 501c3. We've been going back and forth, making some corrections. This afternoon, Pete and I sat down and I think we got we got everything hashed out, and I think we're all on the same page and hopefully can move forward after tonight. So this should give them the, I don't know, freedom's the right word, but the ability to move forward with their plans in the 501c3. You want a motion for that one too, I suppose? Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
So the memo of understanding passes. All right. The agenda item for this meeting now is to discuss personnel matters. This portion of the properly noticed meeting of the Milaca City Council will be closed pursuant to Minnesota statutes under the personnel non-public data exception to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 2A3. The need for confidentiality outweighs the purposes served by the open meeting law in this case based on the following. Confidentiality is necessary to protect the city employees' private data. The purpose of the closed meeting is not to make a decision behind closed doors, but instead it's to determine what actions are appropriate with respect to the potential personnel issue. The only business to be discussed in this portion of the meeting is the personnel issue and what action, if any, should be taken. I will now entertain a motion to close this portion of the meeting.
So move.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The council will now go into a closed session. The time is, I don't have it, sorry.
7.
7:50. Only the officials and consultants of the